Okay, team. Thank you all for attending the webinar today on incident response and audit and accountability. We're going to be talking about a lot of the requirements within levels 1 or levels 2, 3, and some even in 4 that kind of drive the need for a SIEM-like product that can aggregate all the logs that you have coming from all the various signals across your enterprise. And how do you detect events? How do you analyze those events and even report on them when something bad is up, if you will? Please use the question function as we go along to ask questions, so that way we can rather address them in the question function within our webinar platform, or afterwards, whether it be in some sort of email or some sort of separate meeting. We'll set up a call with our team. The webinar will be recorded, and you should be getting an email sometime within the next hour after we wrap up. If you have issues, don't hesitate to reach out to rather CMMC at summit7systems.com, or you can even reach out to Sam the Man at summit7systems.com. That's a new little email address we created. So due to time and to get to the materials, we may not get through all questions. Go ahead and check those out. Or go and submit those, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. And also, too, we have some polls that have already queued up, so you can check those out. And please give us some responses. It'll fuel a little bit of our conversation. And, so thanks again for joining us. I'm going to do some quick intros to talk about the 2 speakers that we have joining today. First time in a while we've had more than one speaker join us on one of these webinars, so I'm really excited about this. These guys are both very technical, very well-versed. Not only on the IT and the networking and cloud system side of things, but also too on the security side of things. So starting that off, we have a CISSP joining us today with Mr. Ben Curry. Ben is an 11-time MVP and business leader, author, and enterprise architect, specializing in Microsoft cloud technologies pretty much from the get-go. He is a former NASA data center lead and architect and has several published works through Microsoft Press, many of them around SharePoint and also to Office 365. Joining him will be Mr. Dave Blizzard. He is a senior consultant on the Azure government side of Summit 7 and brings nearly 30 years of experience across networking, cloud systems, and security practices. And he also has direct experience in working in kind of the defense industrial base, the aerospace and defense market, where he spent some time at Lockheed and CSC and some others, and as well as spending some time in the healthcare industry as well. He is lastly a Microsoft certified Azure Solutions Architect expert and has passed a couple tests to earn that. So nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and jump into some agenda as well as CMMC, some primer. Should be really brief, really short. So agenda, we are going to do, again, as I said, some quick intro on CMMC, talk about some of the applicable domains and the stuff we're going to be talking about today with Ben and David, and get into specifically, we'll go domain by domain. And we're not talking about every single practice within the domain, but kind of hitting the high notes, if you will, and then go over some Azure Sentinel strategy throughout that and some demos. So CMMC, as most of you know at this point in time, if you don't, just type in Google, what is CMMC real quick, and come back to us and join us in about 5 minutes and you'll be caught up. But CMMC specifically is made up of various domains that more or less map to what was previously a requirement in DFAR 7012, which is the NIST 800-171 framework. Many of them map to control families, but we have 17 domains. Within them, there is some overlap between NIST 800-171, like I said, but there's certain things that did not, or that were added, I should say, from NIST 800-171 to CMMC, and that's kind of why we discussed, or why we chose to talk about these two domains, or these 3 domains within this talk today. Because these introduce some new requirements that weren't in DFARS and Ben, and then we'll talk about that some more. So within those domains, you have some processes and you have capabilities, and within those capabilities, you have some practices. And so we're going to highlight some of those practices, throw them on the slides as Ben and David talk through that. And actually, before I even move on, it probably is good to note, all this is really going to be in the suggestions that Ben and David are going to be talking about, and this goes for pretty much all of our content. Right now, there's no audits taking place. I think there's no question about that. And so nevertheless, some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is going to be based off what the requirements are today, how they read today, how we read through some of the explanation that are provided in the appendices or in the appendix to CMMC. So obviously this is not entirely 100% prescriptive, but kind of our take on some of these things. So like I said, we're going to be covering levels 2, 3, and some of 4 mostly in this webinar today. As you know, the levels aggregate. So if you need to meet level 3, for instance, obviously that's going to require you to meet all the things within levels 1, level 2, and level 3. And quite honestly, some of the requirements that really introduce the need for a SIEM type tool or a suite of tools and people, resources to meet the requirements, some of those that are new as in they weren't in NIST 171 and then are now introduced in CMMC. A lot of those requirements are kind of following in even in level 2. So some domains that we're going to be covering here. Access control, we're not going to spend a dedicated amount of time on that one, but just wanted to note here that there are some requirements in access control that kind of tie into this. But the main ones that we're going to be focused on today are Audit and Accountability, AU, and Incident Response, IR. I guess, too, I want to pause here and say that we have done a blog more or less around this topic writ large and around Sentinel. So if you want to go check that out, that's at cmmc.blog. Should be probably 5-6 blogs ago. So if you want to go and check that out, we kind of cover some of the similar topics. And again, the recording will be made available. So you have kind of multiple places you can look. So threat landscape. So really what we're talking about here is your entire estate, your entire data estate, where CUI lives, where it can travel within your organization, what devices it can be on, what systems it's going to be on or can be on, what networks is it going to be traveling over and through. Even from a physical protection standpoint, all of these things can create signals. Even, your security systems on your building, some of that data can be helpful to plug into a tool like a SIEM product to aggregate when people are accessing certain things like your network, let's say your local network, and when somebody accesses the building at an odd hour. There's different things like that all can be correlated to create events that are significant to your organization and hopefully not, but could potentially lead to an incident that needs to be reported on and responded to, in fact. So like I said, endpoints, SaaS and PaaS products, or I shouldn't say products, but offerings, rather some cloud-hosted type software. That goes for IaaS, such as AWS, Azure environments, Azure government, as well as even on-prem systems and on-prem networks. All right, so I think that pretty much does it in terms of housekeeping. I think we should go ahead and roll into the conversation. So to get us started in talking about the requirements in access control and incident response and audit and accountability, I think it's good to go ahead and kind of describe what is a SIEM. So Ben, go ahead and start us off. Tell us a little bit about what is the acronym, what is a SIEM useful for, how does it kind of relay to some of the CMMC requirements, and yeah.
That's a great question, Sean. A SIEM, in technical terms, is a security information and event management system. In basic terms, it's a central repository where we can gather events and syslogs from all of our systems, workstations, servers, whether it's Unix or Windows or across our firewalls or routers, wherever it might be. It's a way we can bring all of that together, and then we can correlate data across all of those individual silos. This allows us to make intelligent decisions and even some automation we'll talk about later today that we really can't do without a SIEM. Now, one of the big changes in CMMC Level 3, we're mostly discussing today, is that the change from DFARS is we now must have a centralized repository. Remember, back in just DFARS 800-171, we had to correlate data across the enterprise. CMMC mandates we have a centralized repository. That is all but mandated a SIEM today. So David, in technical terms, kind of what's a SIEM do from your architect point of view?
Sure. So the first thing you have to do, you're collecting the data into the central repository. In Azure, you're using Azure Log Analytics, and that is where every bit of log data for Microsoft Azure is collected. Sentinel then reads that data, and it's near real time. At that point in time, it has the ability to it analyzes the data based off the roles you have set. It also has tools like threat hunting, which is your proactive ability to look for various threats that might be out there that have not been alerted on, at least yet. It has the capability to investigate. So once you have an incident that you think is important enough to investigate, Sentinel has investigation tools that allow you to see all the data, everything that's related. It lets you save the data for the future, as well as it helps you understand all of the touch points of why this alert and this incident were created. And then as far as the response is concerned, of course, you have your manual capabilities. Azure Sentinel builds in some automated capabilities that we're going to talk about in a little while using playbooks and logic apps within the Azure platform. So it gives you the ability really from an end-to-end perspective to understand your security posture and understand how to detect and then respond to incidents in your environment.
Thanks, David. And on that note, let's go ahead and talk about the first control really here that we have in CMMC, and that control is the AU.3.048 control, where it talks about collecting audit logs and information into central repositories like we just talked about. And this is a big change from DFARS. Now, much of what we did in the 800-171 DFARS world was we were using SIEMs a lot, but it wasn't a mandatory thing, right? So with CMMC, this is now mandatory. And it really is a good security posture anyway. SIEMs can allow us to detect information or detect traffic that may have happened across 7 different, maybe it's a router and a proxy server and a firewall and then a Windows 10 workstation. And we can see this same type of attack or intrusion trying to come into our network, and it can correlate across that on a central repository. Plus, having this in a central repository, and David's going to talk more to this, gives us the ability to do things like playbooks and automation and orchestration, which is a little outside of what a SIEM does. We'll talk about this later in the presentation, but getting that orchestration and automation, built on top of this SIEM foundation that Sentinel provides. So David, tell us a little bit here about, how do we get security alerts out of this thing? Where is data stored in Sentinel? Does Sentinel store data, as an example? I think that's a really common question that I get and most people don't understand.
Sure. So Azure Sentinel has what are called connectors, and basically what a connector is, it connects to various systems, whether they be syslog, whether they be Microsoft services, and they collect that data with the collector. Where it puts the data is actually in Log Analytics. So Microsoft built their own logging tool. It's essentially a big data solution that Microsoft has created, and it captures all the logging in your entire Microsoft environment. And this can be done, you can do it with the cloud environment. You can also collect data from on-prem resources such as servers, routers, and all kinds of different devices. So the data sits in Log Analytics. This gives you kind of some different capabilities. You yourself can query the data looking for whatever information you might need, whether it's security related or not. As it relates to Azure Sentinel, Sentinel has analytics roles that are built in, and they're based off of Log Analytics queries. So it looks for various data, and then if it finds certain triggers, it will create an alert and an incident. And then it will respond if you've set up any kind of automation. It can alert you via email. It can disable user accounts. It really depends on what the alert is and what you think your response needs to be to it.
All right, thanks, David. And I know we're going to dive into these a little bit more. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So, you were talking, about log analytics and how we store data, and you talked about getting alerts out of Sentinel. So tell us kind of an overview of what Sentinel is, because we're hearing things like events and incidents. You said something about I think a logic app under log analytics and connectors. Can you go into those just at a high level and kind of introduce our audience here, kind of what those are?
I can, yeah, and there's a lot of terminology that goes along with this. you kind of start at the event level. So an event really is just anything that is logged into the log analytics workspace. So any record that is imported into that is considered an event. From there, you've got dashboards. Well, the Sentinel terminology really, we'll talk about that. So you have workbooks and playbooks. So workbooks are really dashboards that Microsoft has built for you, and you can create your own. And playbooks are that's your automation piece. So with a playbook, you're going to use Azure Logic apps and to create the automation and the response that you need to security incidents. And then you've got connectors, you've got other dashboards, incidents. So there really is a lot of terminology. We're going to go through and show you some of these today. We're going to do demos and show you kind of what they are, what the function of them is, and kind of how you would use them in your environment as far as configuration and why you would use certain features with Azure Sentinel.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about connectors here. I think that's one of when I first started with Sentinel, that was one of the big things for me because it was like a big easy button so that, I could go into Sentinel and they gave us, out of the box connectors to easily connect to things like, 365 and these other. So talk to me a little bit about the connectors we have, just out of the box.
Sure. So Microsoft provides a number of connectors. There really are two main types of connectors, right? So your first one is going to be connectors that connect and integrate directly with Microsoft services, such as Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Office 365, okay. Azure Activity Logs. So and there are a number of those, and they're seamless connections. And you can have them connected literally in seconds. So it's a very nice piece.
Cool. When you say Azure Activity Logs, I mean, what kind of data are we getting out of Azure into Sentinel there?
Sure. You're getting every bit of activity that you do in Azure. So me as an admin, if I go in and I create a virtual machine or I create a service, every bit of that information is logged. And that will come into Log Analytics, and therefore it can be analyzed. So, for that would be something if you're just monitoring or paying attention to administrative.
So if somebody creates an app, enterprise app, I would get that could be alerted in Sentinel.
Absolutely, yes, you can create an alert for that if you'd like.
All right, very nice.
It's pretty detailed. The amount of information that is collected and what you can actually see in your environment is pretty amazing what they've done.
Yeah, and I've noticed Microsoft keeps releasing more and more connectors that are native out of the box. We know in preview now there's a Teams connector, for example. One of my favorite ones is the Advanced Threat Protection connector. Tell us just a little bit about that connector.
The Advanced Threat Protection connector, really, that one is actually fairly easy. That one is anytime there's an alert that is thrown in your Advanced Threat Protection, it will automatically trigger something in Sentinel. So it'll create that incident for you, and then of course it'll take action based off how you have it configured. So any alert that comes through will automatically go to Sentinel, and you'll know about it right away.
I set these phone calls with a lot of you do too with clients where we're architecting these solutions, and even in pre-sales this comes up a lot. What about my non-Microsoft products? I've got Checkpoint, I've got Fortinet on premises, and I've got Cisco ASAs, and I've got routers. It's the standard 30 or 40 we get all the time. Can we wire those up to Sentinel?
Absolutely. So Microsoft, and we'll show you this in a demo later. The other connector that they have is just third party. That's how they kind of phrase it. It's for third party devices or software or appliances. And so Microsoft has some built in, as you can see on your slide. Barricoded Checkpoint, Cisco ASA. All of these are already built in. Now it's a little bit more than a one-click connection. However, the data does come in if you're bringing it in CEF format. It knows how to understand and read that data. Therefore, it can show you graphs and it can send you the alerts based off of that data very easily. Okay, now for a quick demo of the Azure Sentinel data connectors. From the overview screen, you're going to go to Configuration and Data Connectors. First thing you see are the data connectors that are provided by Microsoft out of the box. There are two main types of data connectors that they provide. One of them is going to be integrated with Microsoft services, so Azure Active Directory, Azure Activity, Microsoft Office 365. Those are going to be integrated with the services, and they're going to be super easy to connect. Your second type of connector is going to be for third-party devices, even applications, basically any third-party data that you want to pull in for Azure Sentinel to analyze. So we'll start with an integrated service or a connector, Azure Active Directory. So what you see when you click on them are on the right side, you see status, the provider, a description. You also see related content. And we'll get into this a little later on, but it tells you how many workbooks, queries, and rule templates are associated with this data type. Down at the bottom, you see the last time that you received logs into log analytics from the service. So we'll take a quick look at the connection type. So what you see is the prerequisites for being able to use this data connector. It requires certain permissions and certain licensing depending on what you're trying to connect. And under configuration, if you've never connected it before, you'll come in and you'll see these two checkboxes are unchecked. All you will do is check what applies to you, apply changes, and it will go off and make that connection for you if you've met the prerequisites. And once that's done, the data will start flowing in. Usually, it can take up to an hour or so, depending on the type of data you're pulling in. Some will come in immediately, and some take a little extra time to come in. So then we'll take a quick peek at a third-party connector. We'll use Checkpoint in this particular case. So Checkpoint, this is for a checkpoint firewall. This can be a physical firewall or an appliance that you have built up in Azure or your on-prem environment. So here you'll have the same information as far as the related content, but the connection is going to be a little different. So we'll take a look at that connector page. In this case, you get a lot more instructions. So the way that the third-party connectors work, you're going to take the data from the provider. So that could be a firewall, it could be access points, a number of devices on-prem and in Azure. And you're going to send that data to a log collector, and that's going to be on a Linux machine. And once that data reaches a Linux machine, then it is taken from that machine and sent to Log Analytics for Azure Sentinel to analyze. And that's your quick demo of the Azure Sentinel data connectors.
Awesome. Thanks, David. The next control we want to look at is Audit Accountability. It's AU.2.041, and the control says ensure that the actions of individual system users can be uniquely traced to those users. Here's what that really means. When you get into CMMC, you do it too, right? CMMC, and you look at the description here, it's about more than just saying what does a user do. The example is source and IP address. It's what actions did take in the system, where did they edit. And we see customers very often focus on workstations and servers. We're in a different day and age. A big part of a SIEM is events. So think about your thermostats, think about your Wi-Fi routers, think about the door alarm in your building. So all of these, if they're on your network to be compliant, you've got to be putting those events into a SIEM, a central repository. So getting all of those events here into allows me to see when a user came through the door and did they log in. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we saw a user after hours log into one of our systems as an administrator, but we did not see them come in the building either, right? So we're like, okay, that's an example of where we could have a playbook that says, hey, maybe we need to alert someone in this action. A lot of this, we get this data out, with analytics rules, and that is what I know about analytics rules. So, David, why don't you give us an intro on analytics rules?
Sure. Analytics rules is a feature of Azure Sentinel that allows you to build queries and look for very specific incidents or events. Look for very specific events and correlate them to. It could be time. You could correlate directly to an individual user. It's almost unlimited what you can do with it. Microsoft builds in or gives us a number of rule templates, almost 100, out of the box. So, and these are ones that Microsoft security team has spent a lot of time building what they believe is important and certain things that individuals or companies are going to want to understand about their security posture. With Sentinel, you have the ability to look at every single incident. You can go down to a specific user. You can go down to a specific system. And the data that it captures is going to, it's a lot of data, and it gives you very specific information about what users are doing in your environment. So any change that happens with your Office 365 environment, it's going to be in there, and you can alert on that if you'd like. Windows servers, if you have Windows servers in your environment, whether they're in the cloud or on-prem, if someone does some suspicious activity on those servers, that's also going to be in there, and you'll be able to alert on those and take action as necessary. So I think what we're going to do right now is show you a demo of the analytics rules in Azure Sentinel. From your overview screen, you'll go to Configuration, Analytics. So here you see all the roles associated with Azure Sentinel that Microsoft has provided. Under rule templates, this is everything that's available out of the box from Microsoft. There's no additional charge for these, and you can pick and choose any of them that you'd like based off of your environment and what you would like to capture an alert on. So once you create a rule, it shows up under your active roles, and here you can modify these. These are completely customizable to meet your environment and meet what your needs are from a security standpoint. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at a random one. We'll choose attempts to sign into disabled accounts. So when you first click on it, on the right-hand side, you're going to see the description. You're going to see the severity level that is set out of the box. And then you're going to see the rule period and the rule frequency. I've changed this one. The default for Microsoft on these are a lot of these are going to be to run once a day and to capture the last 24 hours to see about the alerting fees. And I'm going to show you how to modify that right now. So you click the edit button, and it's going to bring up the analytic rule wizard. So here is your basic information. You can rename this if you'd like. You can change the description. Obviously, most people don't do that. And if you are changing or modifying this to a point where it's going to change a tactic used or add a tactic that's used, you can actually select that here and add it to this rule template. Next, you're going to see this is the query that comes out of the box from Microsoft. Again, this is customizable to meet your needs if you would like to change it. You can map various entities as well. So you see these two are defined in the query. The other two really have nothing to map to in this particular case. So here's where it gets really important. Some people would like to be alerted on a more real-time basis than the once-a-day scenario. So here you can change this to minutes, hours, and days, right? So you can do 1 day if you only want to see it once a day, or use it once a day. Then you can put your frequency in here. So right now this one is set to run every 5 minutes, and it's going to look at the last 10 minutes of data, and that's how it's going to determine whether or not to alert you. The alert threshold, you can set this as well. So if your threshold is, if it happens more than 3 times, then it will alert you at that point in time. If you set it to 0, obviously any positive hits are going to send you an alert based off of this criteria. And you can also stop the query after an alert is generated. Depending on the scenario, you may get email blasted if you let this continue to run. So it's really just thinking through the query and the alert and what you want to see. So here you have the automated response, and we're gonna take a look at this later. Here you're going to see all the playbooks that you have available to you for this particular alert. In this case, we have one. This one just sends an email alert. Right now, this is a very basic playbook that we have created. If this alert is triggered, it will send an email to the people that are configured inside of this logic app in playbook. So then you go to the last screen. Here's where you can review, make sure you have what you want configured, and then you hit save. Okay, so now the rule is saved. You'll be able to go here and you'll immediately see the changes. And I didn't make any changes on this one. However, you'll see the changes right here immediately. You also have the ability to create a new rule. We're not going to go through that process today, just due to lack of time. But you can create these roles. You can customize however you want. You have the ability to set all of this yourself to meet the needs of your security organization. And that's it for this demo.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the demo. We're going to roll forward here into a couple of controls in this slide. It kind of feels like there's some overlap, so I want to try to point out some nuances as we move through these controls here. If you look at it, AU 2042, create and retain system audit logs. There's some additional verbiage here. It says, to the extent needed to enable monitoring, analysis, investigation, and reporting. And then AU 2044 talks about reviewing audit logs, but it goes into more detail about the types of events. And so they're kind of a little bit different slant than just shoving events in a central repository. Out of the box. We could take every Win10 box, every Linux server, every Windows server, every router. We could take every event they ever generate and shove it into your SIEM. We're talking about Sentinel here, but that would be big and ugly. And it creates a lot of white noise. So what we really want to do, and there's another control we'll talk about here in just a little bit, where we have a requirement to only record that which we need to monitor, analyze, investigate, and report. So let me give you an example. We were working with a client, and they have tons of file shares. Well, they had a lot of file shares that were just public data that wasn't anything terribly secret, no CUI, no CDI. But they had file shares where they knew there was a lot of CUI. Further, within that, they had file shares, there was ITAR data. And so when we looked at logs in the different systems and drives, we had different logging set up, right? So you got to remember, a SIEM's great for collecting data back, but it's only going to collect what the server or the router or the workstation sends. See, a big piece of this puzzle is defining what events you want off of these source systems that you want to put into Sentinel. You may think it's a great idea to shove everything into Sentinel, but what you're doing is you're putting more hay in the haystack. On that note here, talk to me a little bit about, connecting these systems we talked about up. Let's assume that we've kind of limited some of those events. How do we get those wired up to Sentinel?
So, you're once you define what you want to collect, you're going to go through the process we looked at earlier, which is your connector process. And in some of these logs, so as you can see on the screen, the security events for Windows, there's a setting within Security Center when you set these up, and you can tell it, to collect minimal, common, or all events. And that's really based off your policy and what you decide you need to collect. And Microsoft defines what it actually collects when you change those settings. And you can take that further. At the server side, you can say, I don't want to collect, event 4079 or whatever it is. You can really define down to what you want to collect very specifically, and that will be the only data that goes into Azure. Obviously, as you can see, you want to monitor admin activities. If somebody's making changes to users, one of the analytics rules that's out of the box actually is if you want to, if someone creates an admin account on one of your Windows servers and then deletes it, and within 10 minutes, it will alert you on that if you'd like it to, because that's suspicious behavior. Creating admin accounts, maybe they're trying to pull something off and then they get rid of the account to try and cover their tracks, right? So there are a number of rules and customizations you can make, but as Ben said, it really is about defining what's necessary for your environment, what you really want to track, so that you don't get caught up with all the noise and just collecting everything under the sun that you're never going to use.
Yeah, it's interesting you say admin activities. I get alerts on our domain. And any time there's a privilege escalation, I get a text message and an email. So how do we control, so what you just said was somebody comes in, they escalates their rights to administrator, do something bad in our network, right? And they go out and remove themselves. What keeps them from being able to go into Sentinel and change the alerts and logging and all of that information to,
Yeah, well, that's where our back comes in. So Microsoft has gone down the road of role-based access control. And there are a number of role-based roles that are in place today. Out of the box, there are some for Azure Sentinel specifically. So in your example, if they need to see the data, there's a reader role, right? That doesn't allow them to go in and change anything. They can see what's set up. They can look at some of the reports, but they have no ability to change what the role settings are. So they can't disable that particular role. That would trigger that detection. And then down the line, as well, like I said, there are a number of out-of-the-box roles. If you're a big enough organization, have a big enough security team or auditing team, you really want to separate that out. You have the ability to create custom RBAC roles as well. Microsoft's giving you that ability. So you can use the out-of-the-box if they work for you. If they don't, you can customize that to fit the needs of your organization.
So, if you're a smaller organization, say you're in the, 10 to, 400 user range, you're probably not going to create custom RBAC roles unless you had a very specific contract or maybe a program that needed it.
That's right.
Yeah, we tend to see this more in a little bit larger clients where they have more a division of services, right, where they have very specific different types of teams.
Right. Yeah, your custom roles are going to be geared towards organizations that have, for lack of a better term, they're wearing single hats, right? So as their roles. If you have people that are, if you're a small organization and you have individuals that are wearing multiple hats, you're likely not going to need to do those custom roles as much.
All right, cool. So, we control, who has access to it. I like the RBAC conversation. Microsoft's invested a ton of money into, RBAC across the Azure platform, not just in Sentinel. We have another requirement here that is the, AU 3.052. It talks really about providing audit record reduction and report generation to support on-demand analysis and reporting. That's a mouthful. A minute ago, we talked about, not logging everything. And, you said there's some out-of-the-box policies, and I like that. I think this is an area to where we really do want to dig in a little bit. And we need to define in an incident, what do we need? Well, this goes back to incident response, of course, because without an incident response plan done, how do we know what events we need to respond to an incident? And so a lot of people put the cart before the horse here. It doesn't mean you can't put Sentinel in place right on day one and get those events, but you have to revisit these event types and thresholds once you get your incident response plan in as well. Let me give you some examples. You've seen some of these too. Maybe you'll have some ideas. So let me give you a couple, and I'll let you chime in as well. Very common, I see people log all failures. The last one I saw was on the ADFS server. Thousands of users logging in a day, and they were capturing all the failures on this ADFS server. When I was called in to do the incident response, however, they were successfully logging in. It had been a phishing attack. And they weren't logging any of the successful logins, and so I didn't have those really valuable breadcrumbs. So this is where if you've not set up a SIEM before, if you've never used any of these log aggregation products like NetIQ or Splunk or AlienVault or any of these, this is a place to borrow someone's learning curve. Obviously, we're really good at this, but because this is where you need to make sure you're getting the right information. Otherwise, you get in an incident, and that's not when you want to be defining what types of events you have. Because, see, the requirement here is not just to limit the events. It's really about record reduction. And that word reduction is key because they're telling us don't have white noise. Of course, we don't know what this looks like yet. Nobody does until, their assessors start doing their job. But this is just a good idea anyway. What do you think?
No, I think that's exactly accurate. It really is truly understanding what you're looking for and getting all the pieces of that puzzle, right? Like you said, if you're capturing failures without successes, you may miss the boat, when you actually have an incident or need to investigate something. So that's a very accurate statement. And so thinking through this from the beginning, as you're looking to implement, these regulations and use a SIEM is very important.
So when I connect to these systems, whatever it might be, you talked earlier about a workbook and a data type, I think you said.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that again. I know you touched on it earlier, but help them understand a workbook, how what it is, how you use it, and how it's useful. Sure.
So really, workbooks are in Azure Sentinel are dashboards. They're dashboards that Microsoft has built. They have a number of them out of the box that they've built for us, and what they are is they're specific to data types. So a data type, Microsoft defines the data type as, Azure Active Directory data, or, your Cisco firewall data. So it builds these dashboards out of the box for you. And the beauty of it is that, they give you templates. You can save these templates off, and you can customize these dashboards to meet whatever need you have. You can take the data from them. You can take the panels that you've created in your workbooks, and you can apply them to a central security dashboard. When you go in Azure, you can have a central dashboard that has components of your workbooks that it lets you review. Say first thing in the morning, you're going to review what's happening in your environment. Well, you can see this, and then if you see anything that alarms you that maybe didn't get alerted on, you can go and then look at the workbook specifically and start digging into that data.
I got it. So each workbook is that data type, but then we can create an Azure dashboard that can roll those up into a overarching view of the systems. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, I do too. And we're going to go ahead and do a demo of that right now for you.
Cool.
The workbooks that Microsoft provide are essentially customized dashboards for specific data types. So from the overview screen, you go to threat management and workbooks. As you see, this defaults to the templates that Microsoft has provided. There, again, no additional charge for these. These are built in. And you can see there are Microsoft integrated workbooks as well as some third-party workbooks that give you some really good information. For a particular demo, we're going to take a look at Azure Activity. So I've saved this workbook off, and you can't modify the templates that Microsoft has provided, but once you save it off, it shows up under My Workbooks, and you can customize all you'd like. And I'll do a quick example of some customizations. Okay, so when the dashboards load, it's running queries in the background against Log Analytics to provide the most recent data for you. So every time you run it, it's going to give you the most recent data. So Microsoft has said these are what's important, right? So each category essentially is its own panel. And so you have the option to change your time frame. You can do the last 24 hours, the last 5 minutes. So there's a lot of options within that. What I'm going to do is show you how to modify this, and then one of the features I kind of prefer over the rest of them. So here you're in the edit screen. You have the option to edit each of these yourself. So you can actually go edit this entire query if you'd like. So you can add, you can change, just the name of these tiles down here if you'd like. This is 100% customizable based off of the needs of your organization. You can also, if you don't like this at all, you can just remove it, and then it goes away. So that's a quick little example of what you can do there. You can actually write your own dashboards, and when you go to create a new one, you'll come here to the advanced section, and you can just paste your code into here, and this will populate the dashboard for you as you've designed it. One of my favorite options that you have in here, and then there's quite a few, and again, these are completely customizable, is the ability to pin these dashboards to let's say a centralized shared security dashboard that you've created for your organization. So here, you're going to hit the pin options, and you can pick and choose. You can pin the entire workbook. You can pin all individual tiles into your dashboard. Personally, I like to pick and choose the ones that I'd like to see on the dashboard. So in this case, we're just going to go ahead and select, we're going to pin the activities over time. It tells me it's pinned to dashboard, and it automatically pins to the active dashboard that you have. So here we're going to view that dashboard. And the unsaved edits, we're not going to worry about that. That was me deleting that tile. So as you can see here, it put this tile in here, and I already had this one in here from a previous demo. But you can publish the changes, and then once that's complete, now you have the option to edit this and move these tiles wherever you'd like them. You can resize them. And so whatever's important from your workbooks that you need, you can put these individual tiles on a dashboard and make it look however you like. And this will be something that, first thing in the morning you come in, you check the dashboard to kind of see what's going on, and you have everything right in front of you in one view. So here I'm going to finish customizing, and I'm going to publish those changes. And then we're all set there. And that is the quick view of Sentinel workbooks.
Cool. Thanks for that demo. That really does lead us into incident response next. There's really 3 controls. I'm going to kind of talk about all 3 of them at one time. Your IR2093, IR2094, and IR2096. 9.3 talks about, detecting, reporting events. 9.4 talks about analyzing and triaging. 9.6 then talks about developing responses to declared incidents according to predefined procedures. So let's talk about 9.6 first. I know it comes later, but 9.6 is really where we need to understand the processes. So when an incident happens, what do we do? And I've seen some really generic templates online, and they say this will make you compliant. I don't agree. Let me give you an example. They said when we see an intrusion into our network, we're going to audit for account activity. Well, that's so generic. And that's what we see a lot. Let me tell you real world what this really looks like. This like we built for other people as well, and at NASA, for example. So if someone breaks into our network and they access our Azure Active Directory, they get administrative access, what do we do next? Okay, we shut down public access to our IaaS boxes. We limit, authentication to our PaaS boxes. Well, we lock down the VPN to on-premises. See, that's real incident planning. Not, we're going to look at an account and see, what they've done. If that's your thing, your plan is, you're going to be totally unprepared when an incident happens. Absolutely. So I'm going to start with 9.6 to say, do this for real. I get that we can kind of glaze over this and be compliant, but this is a good time to be secure and not just compliant. So this really does take us then into IR2093. We need to detect and report events. It's pretty straightforward. But we have to define the events first, which we've talked about. And then I think more importantly, you get into IR2094, where we talk about analyzing and triaging events. I think that's where the meat is here, is saying, okay, we have an incident. What do we do in an incident? Oh, we report it to the CISO. We report it to the CIO. We report it to facilities manager. We report it to our Azure security manager, our architect. So defining who's immediately alerted, and then being able to give them good data. Now, a couple ways we've done this, right? So right now in Gov, I know we don't have full commercial capability in Azure yet. Right. So it's more of a manual process. So, it's fine. It works. We're going to see that commercial Azure into Azure Gov, we think, fairly soon when it comes to incident response. Today, it's still easy, though. You have everything in one repository. You got a search engine. We can still go find those events and give to the different people. But just remember things like, physical on-premises, HR is a big one, right? Was it an insider threat? So these types of things, and so the technology does support this, when it comes to incidents. So tell me a little bit about, Azure incidents, and let them know, what's in the platform today, what can you do, and what can we really look forward to tomorrow when Microsoft gets that released?
And so today, there is an incident module, within Azure Sentinel. And what that is, every time there is an alert triggered, it'll create that incident for you. So the incident itself gives you all the information around, what actual data, what data points it saw to generate that alert. And so it gives you the ability, when those incidents are created, it gives you all the data necessary to start an investigation. As Ben mentioned today, in the Gov side, it's a manual process. So you can still see all the data, but you'll be kind of manually going through and putting those pieces together yourself with various things like bookmarks. Assigning those bookmarks to the actual incident so you can remember what you were looking at. In the future with Microsoft, which is really cool, and this is available in commercial today, they have an investigate option, so it automatically helps you start that investigation. And it will show you, there's some visualizations that go with that, and it shows you all the touch points, all of the entry points, all your bookmarks, and it puts them in a nice graphic for you, so that it helps you really put the whole incident together, do your investigation, and figure out the response, behind that. So now we're going to take a look at the Azure Sentinel incidents. Incidents are created based off of alerts. So you have your analytics rule templates that are obviously analyzing the data constantly. When something is triggered there, it will create an incident for you. So here's when you go into the incidents page, you're going to see everything that is active. So we're going to go take a look at that now. And it defaults to 24 hours. It defaults to a status of new and active. You can change this if you'd like. And we're just going to take a quick peek at one of these right now. This one is a key vault anomaly that our rule template has picked up. So you're going to click on that incident. And the first thing you're going to want to do is understand the severity. And you're going to probably want to assign it to someone. So I'm going to go ahead and assign this one to myself. And then I'm going to change the status to active. So this helps me understand that is something I am currently investigating. If you go down this page, you're going to see a description, of course, and then you're going to see what they call evidence. This evidence, there's 27 events that triggered this particular alert in incident. So we're going to take a look at that, and this is going to bring up a query in Log Analytics where you can look at the specific information that generated this alert. Without going through all of this in too much detail, for time's sake, you can look at the detail of each of these events that's in Log Analytics, and if you decided that it is important and you want to save it to that incident, you're going to check this box. You're going to add a bookmark. You change the name. You can change the entity types if you'd like. You can add tags, and then you can add notes if you'd like. And here you can just create the bookmark to look at later, or you can create and you actually attach it to your incident. So we're going to attach it to the incident. And as you can see, it is already done. And here now we have 4 bookmarks. I already had 3 assigned to this one. Now we have 4. And the benefit of the bookmarks here is as you're going through doing investigations, you're going to run across things that you're going to have to remember later. And this helps you remember what you were looking at when you're going through this investigation, so that you don't forget that you saw some piece of data or some activity that triggered a flag for you. If you want to go and look at the bookmarks, all you have to do is click here. And this will show you all of the events that you bookmarked for this specific incident. And again, the bookmark name, you can customize that. And so this allows you to go back, again, like I said, throughout an investigation and determine what's important, what's not, and helps you remember what you were looking at. When you're finished with the investigation, you can change your status to closed. Here you can classify, right? So it's a true positive, or all the way down to false positive, or you just really don't know at this point, but it's not important enough to keep open. So select your classification. In this case, we're going to go with undetermined. Hit apply. And now it's closed, and it will disappear off of your dashboard. And that's the end of the demo for the Azure incidents.
Cool. Thanks, David. That was a great demo. And, just want to touch briefly on IR 2097 as well. Performing root cause analysis on incidents. Now, this is one of those things that, a SIEM helps us a lot, right? It doesn't replace a security professional. I think as we move here, higher numbers in level 3, this is especially true in level 4 and 5. Some of the tools remain the same, but the level of expertise and the process is mature. I think, you hear Scott's talked a lot on here, Daniel, Sean, about, the processes needed. Of course, we're tech guys. I'm an old school architect. You're an old school architect. Young at heart, though, right? We look at this and we look at the level of technical expertise that's going to be required at level 3, much less level 4 and 5, right? I mean, if you look at the letter of the compliance, the letter of the law, if you will. So when it comes to incident response, it can certainly help us. Like he said, most of this is not in Gov when it comes to the automated incident response. So, but things like navigating relationships, you see the example here on the screen. He showed you some cool demos, expanding the scope, queries, timelines, correlation, deep insights. This is great stuff once it's released. But if you were to take a person who's inexperienced in this, it's not going to help them a lot, right? You still got to be able to read the data. But what it does is it allows us to respond to an incident in the right place immediately. Instead of us munging through logs, right, and getting there 6 hours from now while the hacker's still in our system, it allows us to get there. And I don't know how soon. How would you do this? So somebody hacks your system. How do we find out where they've been? How long they've been there? Tell me a little bit about that.
It's really about, it's all about the data. The good thing is with the rules and the incidents that we have available to us, as soon as we understand something's happening, we now can immediately go to the workbooks, understand what's happening with that. We can go to the alert, to the analytic rules that are creating these incidents for us. And when you have an incident that's generated, as you saw in the demo, it'll take you directly to the data you need to see and to help you understand what generated that incident. And that helps you focus on the area you need to focus on if you think there's something happening in your environment.
Cool. Just kind of as a recap, there's a few highlights I want to point out. First of all, if you were just getting by on this 800-171, so if you were just getting by on DFARS, it's not enough. Right there, we had to correlate data. So, and what that meant was before we would have lots of logs, but maybe we'd have a tool that would dashboard across those repositories. It was super common. That doesn't cut it. So we have to have a central repository. You look at things like incident response, the auditing, accountability. We need tracing. When I'm in a system, what events, what did I touch? And how do I know that across multiple systems, the users in 4 or 5 systems? So really getting that central repository, correlating, being able to get traceability is the big requirement there. But then also, how do we respond to incidents? Because let's say, for example, the intruder comes in, I need to know everywhere that account was within this time frame, and maybe from a specific location. Maybe they logged in from the office, or they logged in from, some other country. So, and then last, and really, there's a lot of expertise required here. Sentinel is easier than probably any other SIEM on the market today. It is easier to put in place. It is easier to get configured. You can connect it to your on-premises, and that's awesome. But it's still not easy, right?
Right.
So it still takes an expert. You still need to be in it. At a minimum, if you've never done a SIEM. What would you say? What kind of advice would you get? They've never built a SIEM. Who should they get to help? And at what point do you think they can run it themselves? And there's some training they could take, things like that.
Yeah, there's training, from security response, right? And becoming a security professional takes a lot of years, right? As you know. It takes a long time to get through that. In my opinion, I've worked with a few different SIEMs over the years. And as you were just kind of stating, the Azure Sentinel certainly it's one of the easiest to get connected, one of the easiest to get up and running and understand and start collecting that data, right? That's the first piece of it. You have to get the data collected, and then you work your way from there down, through the data, understanding what your needs are, as a business and requirements from the government. So, I think Sentinel is definitely it's above the others in my opinion from a let's get it up and running standpoint. Then like as you said, now you have all this data, what do you do with it? Yeah. So Azure Sentinel gives you some great tools to help you start understanding the data, but really digging down into that data, it takes time and experience. And you certainly, like you said, there's training, there's us. There are a number of resources you can use to help you start understanding what to do in that.
Yeah, if your staff has experience, with security and event, management, that's somewhere you can just borrow a learning curve, make it easy, something you take off and run. But if you have system administrators who don't have a SIEM background at all, and they don't know Azure either one, which is pretty common in the beginning, just know that you're not going to be able to run this yourself at first. You're going to want some help. And eventually, I always like to transition to staff. So, I don't, we like to try to get it in the hands of the security professionals on that staff. So. All right. Well, thanks, David. It was awesome. And until next time.